Hi, this is Colin with Maker Farm. In this video we're going to show you how to set up the RAMPS electronics on your i3v printer. Make sure you get the build guide, get everything handy that it says on the RAMPS setup page of that build guide. You'll want to go ahead and get your RAMPS and your printer. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to put all the wires in the printer, because it's kind of a lot of wires. We already took care of all of the extruder wires and hot end wires previously in the video. When you look at your printer, all the arrows are pointing to the right hand side of the printer, which is this side over here. That's also where we're going to be mounting our electronics. So we're basically going to have all of the wires go to that same side of the printer. Sometimes it can make it easier if you label the wires. So instead of just bundling them all up and running them to one side and without labeling them, it can make it nice if you label them, so then you know which one is the Y end stop, which one is the Z end stop, which one is the X end stop, which is the Y motor, Z motors, things like that. But basically, underneath the printer, you're going to see these little notches right here. What you can use those for is we can take the Y motor and we can bring it over, run it up through there. We can also take the X motor and do that on both sides. Make sure to leave on the X motor some slack so that that motor can go up and down. And then you're going to have the Z motor on the left side of the printer that you can do the same thing with. Bring them down and up through there. There's then two holes above that where you can actually zip tie those in place so that they don't move and so that you can make them nice and neat. You can also run your Y end stop down underneath the machine, pulling it tight, and then you can have it come up through there also and be zip tied into place also. For your Z end stop, which is right here, you just run it around the side. For your X end stop, you can just run it around the side and make sure that it has a little bit of slack there. Since it's kind of hard to video this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to wire the RAMPS electronics just here on the table. So what you will do though is you will secure this to your frame. Usually what I like to do first is, when it's just like it is now, I like to plug it into my computer, go ahead, install the drivers, just follow the guide and download the right drivers, depending on the operating system you have. After your printer is set up and the drivers are installed on your computer, then you can go ahead and you can mount this to your printer, and then we can start wiring it in. So when you mount it, it's going to go on the right hand side. There is a set of 3 bolts or 3 bolt holes, and basically it's going to mount using these big long 25mm long bolts, and there's going to be 3 locations. There's going to be one up here, one down here, and one on the other side. And then you're going to go ahead and just put those in that back frame just like that. So it's going to mount like that. And then on the other side, we are going to put the lock nuts on those 3 points to go ahead and lock that down in place. Then I'll show you the LCD now. I'll show you the rest of it just laid out on the table. You're going to take your LCD, and it's going to flip around. It's going to plug in just like that. You can see that where it plugs in. Just right up at the top there. Okay. Then we'll go through one at a time and we'll do everything else just here on the table. Also refer to, there's going to be wiring diagrams so that you can see that also. This will make it easier though too. So the first one that you can plug in is going to be your thermistors. You're going to have two thermistors. One's going to be for the hot end, one's going to be for the heat bed. You're going to see right here is T0. T0 is for the hot end. The one above it, T1. That's where you're going to plug in your heat bed thermistor. T2 is not used at this point. Next ones that we're going to have is we're going to have our end stops. This wire that I'm going to plug in has the red wire. Yours will not have the red wire. They're going to be plugging in here. And we're going to plug in X. It's going to go in that port right there. You're going to notice the blue wire is going to be closest to the edge right here. The Y end stop will go up to. Y end stop will be there. Z end stop, go up 2 more. Z end stop will be plugged in right there. Okay? And your LCD is being plugged in these ones right here, all the way across there. Okay, the next ones that we have are your motors. Let me grab some motor cables. Your motors are going to be already pre-wired, but I'm just going to use this to show you. For these, we've got 4 stepper drivers, and each stepper driver controls a different set of motors. So this is our X stepper driver, this is our Y, this is our Z, this is our extruder. And if in the future you ever added a second extruder, you'd put another stepper driver here, and that would be your other stepper driver. Make sure to refer to the wiring diagram for which is the correct way to plug your motors in. But basically, we plug in our X right there, which is right next to the X stepper driver. Our Y will be plugged in right here, right next to the Y stepper driver. Our Z is going to have 2 ports so that you can plug in both motors. So you can see I've got 2 of them plugged in right next to the Z stepper motor. And then our extruder is going to plug in right there, right next to the extruder stepper driver. Make sure you follow the wiring or the color sequence that's in that wiring diagram. Okay. Next thing that we're going to do is we've got these little heat sinks. It'll come with 5. We're going to use 4 because we've got 4 stepper drivers. It's also going to come with this little little brown 3M adhesive. If you hold it up to the light, you can see that there's 6 patches underneath it. I'm just going to cut them into 6. I only need 4, so I'm just going to do 4 little pieces. Like I say, it's easier if you hold it up to the light. Okay, and then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel off one layer, and you're going to see a little silver thing. This is the adhesive for these heat sinks. So just go ahead and put one of the heat sinks on there, and then you can peel off the tape or the paper, and you should have that silver part stay on that heat sink. Okay, now we're just going to take this and we're going to put it down on this chip. Each stepper driver has a square black chip. That's what we're going to put this on, and we just want to get it on there and try and not have that heat sink touch any of these pins anywhere. We don't want it to ground out on anything. So we've got one on there. You'll just do this for all 4. I'm not going to do all 4 on the video. They're all the same. You just peel the adhesive off. Stick it onto the bottom of your heat sink. Make sure the silver part's still there, and then line it up. Not touching any of those pins. Okay, so far we've wired in, we've put our heat sinks on, we've wired in our motors, we've wired in our thermistors, we've wired in our end stops, we plugged in our LCD. The last ones that we have are just these ones down at the bottom here. This is our power connector. You can unplug it and plug it back in. Make sure you look at the wiring diagram. But basically we have these two on the outer edge right here. That is your negative and your positive 12 volts. That's your 5 amps. That 5 amp power connector drives everything except for the heat bed. So it powers the motors, it powers the hot end, it powers the LCD, it powers the extruder, end stops. That's where it gets all of its power. These next two that are on the inside is the negative and positive 11 amp connection, and the only thing this connector powers is the heat bed. It's the only thing it sends power to. If you have a power supply, or if you have a heat bed that is larger than the 8 by 8 inch heat bed, you're probably going to need a heat bed relay, because that will pull more than 11 amps, and you just can't physically put more than 11 amps through the RAMPS connector, or you will melt it. So I'll show you, there's in the build guide there will be better wiring diagram and of showing you how to connect that to an ATX power supply or a 12 volt power supply. After that, we're going to get our heat bed, and you've got your two heat bed wires. Make sure you take off the little insulation at the end there. And the heat bed is going to go into D8. So I'm not taking off this insulation, but basically you'll put them in there into D8. Get your little screwdriver, tighten those down. Okay, I guess I'll really do this. Put the insulation, take it off, and put them in there. D9, if you were to, you could wire a fan into that, and then you could use the fan to cool the print itself. If you were to print like PLA, since the fan that we are using is to cool the hot end itself, what we do is we just take this and I install that in here when I install my power wires as well. So that would just go into the connector. The black is the minus, the red is the plus. Okay, then we have the hot end, and you just take the wires for your ceramic heater. Those are both going to go into D10. Same thing, there's no polarity. So just strip off the insulation and go ahead and tighten them down there. And then once they're tightened down, that is everything you need to do to wire your ramps, unless you are doing heat bed relay. If you do a heat bed relay for higher, you can use a heat bed relay for a couple things. Number one, for larger heat beds, it will allow you to power them. Number two, it will just allow you to heat your heat bed up faster, and it will basically bypass the RAMPS electronics for the most part, so that if you were to pull too much power, it wouldn't damage it at all. So to use that, heat bed relay has two wires. You would put those in the D8 connection and pull your heat bed wires out of there, and then tighten those down. And then instead you would take your heat bed relay. There's a J1 connector and a J2 connector. You would put one of those heat bed wires in J1, one of them in J2. Doesn't really matter which one. And then we would take our power supply wires, and we would take 12 volts, and we would wire those directly in to J1. You could give it the ground, and J2 you can give it 12 volts, or vice versa, whichever one works best for you. There is actually holes on the side of the frame to mount the heat bed relay also. And then basically what we do is we have power coming in to the 11 amp connector If you're not using a heat bed relay, you may want to double up those wires to give it a lot of power. If you're using heat bed relay, you don't need double wires. You can just do one wire on each of those. And basically what it will do is when it tells the heat bed to turn on, it will send 12 volts through D8. That will actuate this relay, which will connect this to this and this to this, which will give your heat bed full current from your power supply. And other than that, once you get everything plugged in, make sure to follow the build guide to show you how to connect your power supply if you're using an ATX power supply or if you're using a 12-volt power supply. The wiring for those both is a little bit different. So we'll do those separate, just in the build guide, not in the video. And then after that, the next video, we will go through powering it on and also printing some test G-code directly from the LCD. If you have any questions, make sure to refer to your build guide. There's also a contact section where you can get a hold of us if you have any other questions. Thank you.